So my posting to ADFA as the CO was my first posting to the Australian Defence Force Academy. And when I got there, I noticed something very different about all of the trainees at ADFA. Issues with integrity, so they would lie directly to your face. Did you do this? No, sir. I saw you doing it. No, sir. I've got CCTV of you doing it. My sergeant told me to. And I couldn't reconcile that with my experience having dealt with trainees at Duntroon, where integrity is sacrosanct. A lot of behavioural problems, like really low-level, unacceptable behaviour, misadventure type things, a significant lack of motivation, particularly in second year, that had been highlighted by the previous reviews into ADFA, the Gray Review, the CAFE Review, and I think also mentioned in the Broderick Review. So, this lack of motivation and where that comes from. None of what I'm going to talk about today in any way excuses unacceptable behaviour. Unacceptable behaviour is unacceptable. The stuff that I'm going to talk about does not give people a get out of jail free card to say, oh, it wasn't their fault because they were an adolescent. There is, however, a degree of diminished culpability for some of the things they do based on environmental conditions. Why do I use the term adolescence? So your brain has reached its full adult size by the time you're 12. So it's not going to get any bigger. And we normally associate the idea of adolescence with sexual maturity. So from the onset of puberty until you've finished growing, around about 17, 18 years of age. But we know the brain doesn't get any bigger by the time you're 12. But there are a whole bunch of changes that continue to occur inside the brain and how it's wired that continue up until about the age of 25. So it is still growing, it is still maturing, it is still changing until you're about 25 years of age. And because of that reason, it is still, adolescent. Interestingly enough, the World Health Organization is increasingly using the term youth to describe this demographic of 15 to 25-year-olds, recognising that there is something about that demographic that is unique and makes them different from children and different from adults. The prefrontal cortex, the last part of the brain to get myelinated, is your executive decision making. So it's the part of the brain where you conduct planning, which is the ability to understand second and third order effects, judgment, impulse control, empathy, the ability to view a situation from someone else's perspective other than your own. All of these are products of the prefrontal cortex. So what? We look at the young thing, the stupid things that young people do, and often say to ourselves, what were you thinking? The honest answer is they weren't. They weren't thinking. They weren't considering the consequences or the second and third order effects, because that's a product of the prefrontal cortex. And consequence-based punishment is not the best behaviour modification strategy for a group of people who don't consider consequence, which tells us something really, really valuable about motivating and moderating adolescents. They are reward-driven. Praise often. Like extrinsic motivation doesn't mean it has to be physically something that you give them. It can just be praise. Public praise. Well done. Good job. So if you create this roadmap to recovery and multiple waypoints, each one of those things is an opportunity to change the behaviour and addict that adolescent to good behaviour. I want more dopamine. How do I do it? I do good things. Engage the prefrontal cortex. So when we realise that, and we look at what we're doing at ADFA, we're training officers to problem solve. We're doing university degrees. We wanted them to be using their prefrontal cortex and to be laying down new neural pathways. So we changed it and we'd ask them. We'd pose the question to the audience, we'd ask them to discuss it in their small groups, and then we'd ask someone in the small group for their answer. What did your group think? Giving young people the ability to say, well, we thought, instead of I thought, is much less confronting And again, levels of engagement went up.